Jim. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay, we have a guest in our studio today, Dr. Jerry Fuller. How are you doing, Jerry?
I'm doing fine.
Okay, so we're all fine here today. Okay, we each have one head. All right. Today we're going to be talking about something that's pretty close to the passion of Ralph and I think you too, Jerry, and that is psychology, its past, present, and future. Now, the reason that I think it's fascinating in the past is I do teach a course in the history of psychology, and both you and I, Jerry, have been around for a long, long time in the past of psychology. Would you agree?
Yes, we have.
And I've been sort of paddling at the edges because my undergraduate degree, I actually have three majors. I have a major in English and a major in psychology and a major in sociology. I know sociology, that kind of makes me a non-scientist, but that's how it all shook out. That's what happens when you get on the 6-year program as an undergrad.
Okay. Now, you are here at Central Michigan University, where we are usually sitting in our palatial studio, before Jerry Fuller and I, right?
I came here in '63 as an undergrad.
Okay, and you're the 6-year plan?
Well, it wasn't a 6-year plan at that time, but that's the way it shook out.
Too many long nights at the Bird.
Yeah, probably.
Now, and then Dr. Fuller, Jerry, came in
66.
I came in 67 as a student. So we do represent about 150 years of CMU.
Yes, we do.
In one room here.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when I came to CMU, the program had just, in clinical psych, had just started. And you ran the program, right, Jerry?
Right.
Now, what was it like when, before you came here? What did you do?
I worked at a state hospital for 5 years.
That was the one in Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota.
Okay.
I worked at a residential treatment center down in Plymouth, Michigan.
Is that Northville or?
Northville was a state hospital.
Okay.
But this was
Hawthorne Center?
Hawthorne Center.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I also worked at Lapeer Home Training School, which is no longer there.
Okay. Now, you got your PhD up in Canada, right?
Yes, I did.
So,
University of Ottawa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was the PhD training different than, say, a PhD today here in an American university?
I think it was. I think that back then I started in a program that said it was clinical, but it was more experimental.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I got my best training at Wayne State University for my master's degree. That's where I got all my testing courses,
Okay.
therapy courses. And then I went to the University of Ottawa because I got on a scholarship there and worked at the Child Guidance Center. But I thought it was a very good education there.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
Yeah. When I was working in the prison in Canada, in Kingston, I would take courses at Queen's University. And you're right, the clinical psych courses looked a lot more like experimental psych courses.
Right.
Yeah. And so,
Here's a funny anecdote about experimental psych. I took experimental psych at Central before either of these fellows came to Central. And at that time, the experimental psych course involved rats.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a little double gate kind of maze, and the rat had to make a choice between left hand and right hand. And whichever side the light was on, the rat was supposed to discriminate the light and run to that, and the door would open when he ran through. I had a rat that fixated on the left-hand door on trial 1. 150 trials later, he had bumped his head 75 times.
I think that's interesting, Ralph, because when I was at Michigan State, I had a course in experimental and I ran rats. And we had to lastly stand there, and the instructor wanted to know if they could differentiate between colors.
Yeah.
They had 2 boxes, and if they didn't, they got shocked.
Uh-huh.
Stuff like that.
Was that when Stanley Ratner was running that program down there?
I don't
Because
know.
I took experimental psych at State also.
Yeah?
Yeah. But, well, Ralph, did you learn anything from this study with your rat that fixated in one?
I learned that some rats fixate on trial one.
Yeah. Does this apply to you, perhaps?
Perhaps, yes. I fixated on girls when I was 11 years old and have never switched.
There you go. That's better than experimental anytime.
So,
But you know, yeah, the thing is with clinical, I think, now you guys can correct me if I make too sweeping a statement, but I think back in the 60s, people did really not know what to teach or how to teach in clinical psychology. So they fell back on what they did know, which was experimental and kind of Pavlovian training and that sort of thing, because there wasn't a lot of good models for talk therapy or behavioral therapy at the time.
yeah, that could very well be. What do you think about that, Jerry?
Well, I think there were models out there, but unfortunately they weren't totally associated with psychology. Because Dr. Thorne at the Clinical Psychology Publishing Company, he was an MD, PhD, but he was never accepted into the American Psychological Association.
Because of his psychiatric
Because,
connections.
you know, of his background and things like that. So I think that was part of it back then. And the same with Glasser for reality therapy. I mean, again, he was not a psychologist.
Okay.
But he did the schools without failure, and he did a lot of other things in their choice theory and things like that.
Yeah, it strikes me that there was the philosophers
Yes.
and the experimenters, and then there was just the beginning of people who were saying, we can do talk therapy without having to be a medical doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of getting off the ground.
Yeah, when you were here as a student.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So-
when I came to Central, they had just broken off from the School of Education into a separate department. There were like 3 people. And the only master's program they had was experimental.
Mm-hmm.
And well, they brought me in then to start a clinical psych program, a school psych program, and set up the psychology center.
Yeah.
So that's how it all started here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting, the kind of evolution of the psychology department in our university went from this very small beginning to the point in time where it became the, I don't know, can I use the word star? What's a good word for this? The
It was one of the premier programs.
premier, thank
Yeah.
you. That was
Yeah.
at the university, and for a long time we have put out very top quality graduates. I came here as a student, and I came back as a professor. Jerry, you've been here as a professor, and Ralph, you've come back and you've taught here at Central as well as a professor. And we've seen other graduates like Dr. Dunbar, who's in the department, is a premier neuropsychologist. Yeah. And so you'd think that our department would be still, in the ascendancy, but it seems to be in the decline now. Maybe psychology in general is, I don't know.
Well, I think one of the reasons for that, Jim, at least here, is that the university has very, perhaps deliberately, chosen to try and emphasize sciences, hard
Right.
sciences,
In the med school.
yeah, in its development over the next decade.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, well, we need engineers, we need mathematicians, we need strength of material people, et cetera, et cetera. if we look at the mental health figures in the
We
United
really need
States,
mental health specialists.
we
Yeah.
need mental health therapists at an increasing rate.
Yeah. We're going to do a podcast in another couple of weeks, Ralph, about statistics in psychology. You dug up a whole bunch of stuff that is pretty shocking when it comes to the lack of mental health services, here in the United States. So we'll be talking about that.
Well, maybe we should focus on something like a mental health specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And offer some kind of degree in that.
And, if you look at, let's say the Rocky Mountains for a moment, there's a geographic area around the Rocky Mountains where you really cannot farm on a large scale just because of the terrain.
Right.
And what we've got in America right now seems to be the same sort of thing. There are areas in the United States where there's a severe dearth of treatment. Treatment is just very, very limited or not available at all.
Yeah, right. We were talking to Amy, our director, the other day, and she was talking about how services from basically where we live,
Right.
Mount Pleasant North, are pretty few and far between. That to get an inpatient position, you have to go to the UP, right? Is that what she said? To get somebody?
Yeah.
Well, you at least got to get up into the Traverse City,
Yeah,
Petoskey, Charlevoix area.
yeah. That's an area that does seem to have services.
They have some.
Yeah. But you get over to Gladwin and Gaylord and
Yeah.
perhaps not so much.
Yeah, and
Upper Peninsula probably very little.
Mm-hmm.
and they've got Newberry where you can get services.
I think it's closed down.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the hospital in Newberry, it's kaput.
Yeah. But you look at this and you say, okay, I really can't afford to drive 300 miles one way to get an hour with a therapist. And so another podcast we're going to do is about teletherapy and how its availability is making treatment much more reachable for people who are finding themselves in one of these deserts of therapeutic availability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we assume that they will have internet availability?
Yeah.
Well,
No,
that's the second problem with it. One of them is that the therapist may be available through telehealth, but a lot of people just don't have the
Right, technology.
connection
Right.
technology available to them.
Yeah. Or the devices needed, although we can do it with the smartphone. Amy was talking about a client that she had that would hold the smartphone about a foot from his or her face, and all you'd see is the nostril. So we have to get some techniques out here for client training and therapist training.
Well, maybe all we
as
need
well.
is a psych bus.
Well, we did talk about a psych trailer at one time.
Yeah.
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 That trailer is still sitting on campus, by the way.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's over by the police station.
But again, you're going to be on the road a lot,
Yeah.
in order to do it.
Yeah. So, well, you might remember, Jerry, that you would take groups of students out of from the psychology department up to the UP.
Newberry, we went.
Newberry,
Yeah.
Engadine, we were
Yeah.
there, and doing
Special ed students, because they didn't have anybody, and they couldn't qualify them if they didn't have our reports. Yeah.
So maybe that's the future of psychology. Roving bands of psychologists going around. Have Rorschach cards,
Yeah.
they'll travel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Be careful or I'll hit you with my Wexler.
Yeah.
We're laughing, but this is a mental health crisis
It is,
that we're in the midst of. In Michigan, even though we have a lot of politicians who are saying Michigan is the greatest state in the 50. We I think we rank 47th in mental health
Do we really? Yeah.
treatment.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's good enough. I don't know. We don't have a lot of news headlines about people acting badly here in Michigan, right? So when we closed down all of the institutions, that didn't seem to bring a whole lot of disturbed people out into the streets.
Well, I think we put more people on the streets, though.
We did
Yeah.
put more people up, and now the people are getting their mental health treatment in prisons, I think.
Right.
And here's the other thing. I was just reading an article day before yesterday, and the writer of the article said people who are homeless are far from dumb,
Yeah.
and they're opportunistic. So they will go where they can get the best available food programs, service programs, and climate
Mm-hmm.
that is available. So we look at places like Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and you say, "Oh, there's homeless people everywhere." Well, yeah, they're coming because there's no winter. A lot of things have been decriminalized for what we might call petty crimes. So nobody gets arrested for urinating in public or some minor infraction like that. And so, if I became homeless in Mount Pleasant in September, you want to believe I'd be beating feet
Yes.
for California.
Yeah.
Or Florida, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, any place warm.
Any
Yeah.
place warm.
I think, they did a simple study out in San Francisco a while back, and they took somebody off the street who seemed to be pretty bright, and they said to him, "We'll train you in something so that you can, have something that you can fall back on, and you will have income." He said, "I can make more money on the street. Why should I worry about
Yeah.
doing anything else?" The attitude,
Yeah, and there was another study that was done on the results of giving people who were in low income situations $1,000 a month
mm-hmm.
on question. Just here's your $1,000 in the first of the month. Some of them said that it enabled them to buy food for their family. Some of them said that it enabled them to keep a roof over their head.
Right.
But a lot of them ended up saying, it's not enough.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a welfare check of $600 and I get $1,000 a month, that's $1,600 a month. In this area, that covers my rent.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just about.
So it's one of those frustrating things that expenses have gone up so rapidly in the last 2 or 3
right.
years that people who for whom $1,000 a month would have been enriching now say, well, it's nice and I'm certainly grateful for it, but
Yeah. Do you
it's
remember
not
what you
meeting
did
my
with your
needs.
stimulus check when you got those?
Yeah,
What did you do with it?
I cashed it,
I would hope so.
and believe me, I spent some of it on car repairs and new tires that I've been putting on, but it just seemed to vanish. I mean,
And I think, I remember a study also, and this was reported widely when I was a student at Rutgers. And so it was on the news maybe every couple of weeks. In New York City, they took a number of people, I think 25 or maybe 30, and they took them off of welfare completely and paid them a living wage in order to live, period. No strings attached. And at the end of a year, those people were impossible to find. They were out of the welfare system. They had gotten jobs. They had gotten out of their miserable living conditions in New York City. And they were now making money and paying taxes. And it was a win-win sort of program. But, you know, we really don't like to do that here in
No.
America.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, I think part of the problem is when I was at Wilmer, they had a 60-day alcoholic program there. And these guys would come in, and when they left, they were in pretty good shape. But the problem was they went back to Minneapolis or St. Paul, but there was no follow-up. And there was no way to keep these guys reinforced. And guess what? You know, they ended up back again.
Falling off the wagon.
Yeah,
is,
and they
yes.
did the same thing in Detroit. They cleared out a whole area and built homes for these people. And guess what? They didn't know what to do with them. Another guy was used to peeing on the street. He continued to do it because we didn't educate these people. Or they bought, you know, the wrong food in the store. They bought sweets and candies and stuff like that. And so we didn't have the funds to have satellites out there that
do
would
the
follow
follow-up.
up on these people.
Yeah, and that's, you know, when we think of, for example, gambling addiction as a psychological phenomenon, one of the things that the lotteries and the gambling casinos have got down to a science is intermittent reinforcement.
Yeah.
So if you think of the way we treat the homeless or the alcoholic or the other addicts, we treat them and then we release them into the wild with no follow-up, no reinforcement, and we don't say, we will see you in 2 weeks for a 1-hour interview to find out how you're doing.
And that's the issue. Yep, you're right.
You know, and so psychologically, we don't even have the smarts as a society that the casino managers have.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an enlightening conversation, and I thank you, Jerry Fuller, for participating in this.
You're welcome.
And Ralph, until the next time, say,
Keep your stick on the ice.
because we're all in this
Together. Oh, God.